Hello, it's Deepa from the Beaumont Library with your recommended read. Today I'll be reading an excerpt from The Tuscan Child by Rhys Bowen and published by Lake Union Press. December 1944. He was going to die. That was quite obvious. Hugo Langley tried to examine this fact dispassionately. The left wing of the Blenheim bomber was on fire and flames licked at the cabin. Behind him, his navigator, Flight Lieutenant Phipps, lay slumped forward over his instruments. A trickle of blood ran down one side of his face, seeping from under his flight helmet. And Gunner Blackburn was already dead, shot in the rear gun bay by the first wave of Messerschmitts. Hugo wasn't sure whether he himself had been hit. Adrenaline was still pumping so violently through his system that it was hard to tell. He stared down at his blood-spattered trousers, wondering if the blood was his own or came from Phipps. Bugger, he muttered. He hadn't wanted to end it this way, this soon. He'd looked forward to inheriting Langley Hall and the title someday, enjoying the status in the neighborhood as the squire, Sir Hugo Langley. He thought briefly of his wife and son and found that their images stirred little emotion. She'd be all right without him. She could go on living at the hall with the old man until she found someone else, which undoubtedly she would do. His son, that strange, quiet little boy, would be too young to remember him. They talk of him as a hero when in reality he was a bloody fool, a sitting duck. This was a bombing mission that should never have been flown. Everyone knew that Blenheims were outdated, slower than the enemy planes, and in flying north from his base near Rome to reach his targets at the rail yards in Milan, he would have to fly over 100 miles of German-occupied territory. He tried to assess the situation rationally. The Blenheim couldn't make it back to base even if he could get the old crate to turn around, which wasn't likely with one engine on fire, one wing now useless. But he certainly wasn't going to sit there and go down in flames like a cooked chicken. He glanced out of the windscreen and tried to assess the terrain below, but could see nothing. The night was as black as pitch. Cloud cover above, no moon, no stars, no lights down below. But there was also no sign of enemy planes, unless they were still tailing him. He suspected they had decided he was finished and was no longer worth bothering with. From their last reported position, he guessed he must be well over Tuscany by now, maybe even north of Pisa and into territory still controlled by Germans, hilly, wild country. There was a chance he could hide out and make it safely to the coast if he could somehow parachute out without the chute going up in flames. It was a chance worth taking anyway. He fumbled to release the glass hood of the cockpit. The latch came free, but the hood wouldn't budge. For a moment, he felt pure terror, that he'd been trapped in here to be slowly roasted or plummet to earth in a ball of fire, whichever came first. He pushed with all his strength and felt the glass hood finally yield and slide backward. Instantly, the flames looked at him. Go on, do it, he urged himself. He glanced back at Phipps. Sorry, old chap, he said, but I can't take you with me. His fingers, encased in their thick leather gloves, refused to obey him as he took off his flight helmet with the oxygen supply attached. Immediately, breathing seemed to be hard, but he was not flying that high, and it could have been just panic. He reached for his parachute and attempted to strap it on. It felt as if he was frozen in time, as if life had been reduced to slow motion. Eventually, he felt the harness snap shut. Trying not to rush, he attempted to stand, feeling pain shoot through his left leg. Damn, he had been shot. Not much of a chance of running and hiding then. Still better than being burned alive or crashing with the plane. With any luck, he would land in territory no longer controlled by Germans. They'd been driven back to what they called the Gothic Line, running across the peninsula just north of Pisa, and the the Italians were no longer their allies. Having lived in Italy once, Hugo doubted the ordinary people ever had been incredibly pro-German or pro-war. He hauled himself up and out until he was crouching on the good wing, out of reach of the flames, holding on for dear life as the wind buffeted him. Still he hesitated, picturing one of those Messerschmitts lurking to pick him off if he parachuted down. He listened, but couldn't pick up the telltale rumble of an enemy fighter, only the deep growl of his own right engine, the left having died. He tried to remember that distant and brief session of parachute training, how to launch himself and how many seconds to count before pulling the cord so that the chute didn't tangle with the plane. His mind was a hopeless jumble of confusion. And that was an excerpt from The Tuscan Child. I hope you check it out.